Hello, everyone. I'm Devery from the Chicago MBDA Export Center, and we are one of the programs that are offered under Chicago MSDC. Our objective is to help minority businesses grow and scale their business outside of the U.S. with a focus on Africa. Today, we have Mr. Alan Gray, who is the Vice President of Development for AGI International. AGI is a leader in global supply chain management, supplier development, business process, re-engineering, and so much more. So Mr. Allen will be your trainer today. The session will be recorded. And the other thing is questions. Put your questions in the chat and I'll be monitoring the chat for questions. So Alan, you can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you very much. Today I'm going to take you through some what I think is very important parts of international shipping requirements and things that get small and medium-sized companies into trouble if they don't understand certain aspects of how we ship internationally. Okay, we're going to cover the Incoterms to make sure that you understand the significance, what it means, how to use them, and how to get in trouble with them if we're not making sure that we're using the right terms. We'll use process for custom clearance, so you understand if this is your first time doing international, what's the process for clearance. We'll talk about the commercial invoice and the value of invoicing. And if you're talking international, you may hear other terms versus invoice for what we call a commercial invoice. We'll do bill of lading and how critical it is that your bill of lading is exactly what you plan to ship, how you're shipping it, and it should match up with your packing list. We're going to talk about markings. The significance of marking will give you an idea of when you're going international, what you say as a term verbally may mean something different in that language. So we're going to show you actual markings that you would use so that it's universal and everybody understands the same marking, you know, right side up, fragile, and a variety of other things. And then we're going to go through the packing list, which is one of the most important things, because that's where you identify exactly what you have, what you've packed, how you've packed them, how many you've packed, your markings are on there, and you give a person exactly what you need to get it from point A to point B. And then the certificate of origin, that's critical because of tariffs and other laws and relationships internationally. Your certificate of origin determines what rules, regulations are used for your product to be brought into their country, okay? So we're getting started. The Incoterms and definition of 2020, and you may be aware it flies around on the international 2020. In 2020, there were 13 definitions for sales. In 2010, it got reduced to 11. And in 2020, except for some verbal things, it's still at 11. And I want to make sure we're talking about the 11 that are current today and what they mean and how you might use them. So this is the 11, right? It's FOB, which is free on board, FCA, free carrier. Now I'm going to give you some explanation what they mean and who pays. I want you to pay close attention to who pays, when they pay, and what happens when the order changes hands. But we'll do X works, free alongside ship, deliver in place, delivery at terminal, and all these mean something different in terms of who pays and who takes ownership. The CFI, cost insurance freight, CIP, this is the carriage and insurance paid to. CFR is cost of freight. Number 10 is DDP, is delivery duty paid. I'm going to talk a little bit more about DDP and give you some examples of how we use DDP in AGI. 11 is CPT, is carriage paid to the Incoterms description. Now, to give you more information, I've broken these down to explain to you, here's who buys, here's what the buyer does, here's what the seller does. And so if you're not familiar, I'm going to highlight some of the things so you understand that on free on board, the buyer covers all the costs on the onboard movement, which says that the seller delivers the products and goods, they put them on board, they use the containers, they identify the shipments, they do all the things need to be done to get the product on the way to you. They inform you as the buyer the arrangements that have been made. Buyer covers all the costs. Okay. FCA, free carrier, and we'll come back to some of these if you need to later on. It explains that process. Seller delivers the stuff to the carrier. They put it in place of by the buyer or another person the buyer has designated, because sometimes there are organizations who are designated to handle your business in international companies or countries. The responsibility of the sellers to give is given to the buyer. Doing that responsibility of the seller, with the seller's permission, puts that in the delivery in the buyer's name in order to make sure the delivery is secure. They contact a signed contract between the buyer and the seller, and that's on request. But the buyer is responsible for the cost, the risk of all the goods. It's important if you happen to be the seller and you sell internationally, you need to know who's responsible and when they take responsibility for their product. Ex Works, seller delivers the information. The bottom line is on Ex Works, buyer pays transportation costs. All right. And I'm gonna go through some of these kind of quick. If you come back with answers or questions, we'll come back with the chat a little bit later. The FSA is free alongside shipment. Haven't used this very much, but pays for the port and the terminal of shipment, the buyer at the buyer's expense. Again, some of these you will know, they're pretty common. Others you may not have heard of before because you don't use it or you haven't been the customer of someone who's using it. The DAP is delivery in place. This is the seller pays off rate on this obligation to deliver goods at a mutual agreed upon designation of arrival. And it's further than the terminal, the rules usually used by the transport company or mode of operation. It says that if you're going to go from shipping to train to cargo, that responsibility needs to be transferred at a certain point in time. The seller pays all the freight, but the buyer pays the cargo unloaded, the unload at the shipping point, at the shipment point. It gets a little, depend upon your relationship with the buyer. There are better alternatives in this one, but that's the one that's out there and available. The DAT is delivery at the terminal. And all that means is the seller delivers the cargo to the buyer's name at the terminal. And the terminal could be mutually agreed upon, be a warehouse, container, wherever it is. But then the seller takes care of the export responsibility while the buyer takes care of transport, movement, and insurance once the cargo has arrived in the agreed upon place. So if your agreed upon place is the San Francisco Bay shipping or the New York port or wherever it is, at that point in time is when information changes. The buyer takes over the transport movement and the insurance once that cargo has arrived on wherever you've agreed to. CFI is cost, insurance, and freight. Again, this is the seller delivers once the goods are safely packed on board, ready for shipment to an agreed destination. The seller pays for the contract, but once the goods are on board and the payment transfers to the buyer, it's like, I'm paying up to this point, but once you've got it and you've taken ownership, then the buyer takes over responsibility for payment, okay? Again, this one is one of those where you can negotiate that coverage beyond that point to your destination, but that's something that's, the CIF is about cost, insurance, and freight. The CIP carriage is about insurance and paid to. This is, the seller delivers the goods and agreed upon location by the seller. The CIP state that the seller covers the payment and insurance, but the damages or loss are transferred to the buyer once the carrier receives the delivery. Again, this is one of those that you can have additional insurance. You can set it up a special way if you want to, but that's what the CFI, the basic meaning of that is carriage insurance and paid to. 9 is the CFR, cost of freight. It refers to the seller delivering the good once safely packaged and loaded and ready for transport to the shipping port. These, the seller is also responsible for freight payment, but once the goods arrive at its destination, it transfers to the buyer. So if you're shipping from India to the United States, and once it reaches the United States, you may have a situation there where the seller had the responsibility to your destination, and after that point in time, the responsibility transfers to the buyer. DDP is duty paid delivery or delivery duty paid. This is when the seller's maximum obligation. He delivers the goods once cleared the port and ready to unload to the destination. DDP is mostly used when there is more than one mode of transportation. Under these Incoterms descriptions, both buyer and seller are not obligated to insure the goods. The coverage is discussed and agreed to. I will say DDP is one of the most used by AGI International. And it's because we are a 4PL, we sometimes design, manage a supply base for a particular customer. But we may own the design, we may own the manufacturing process. We own getting the parts to our end customer. Our seller, or wherever we buy the parts from internationally, is responsible for paying for everything until it gets to AGI's location. At AGI's location, we would unpack, do assembly if we need to, but then our product is picked up by the customer through a milk run. DDP is commonly used if you are purchasing part from a seller that's at an international location. All right. CPT is carriage paid to. The seller is responsible for delivering the goods to a destination, which is any place agreed in between the seller and the buyer. The seller is responsible for export formalities, while the buyer is responsible for import clearance and formalities. That's the 11 terms that are mostly used today in the system. Again, we'll ask some questions. Final thoughts, though, is whether you're the buyer or the seller, you need to make sure that you're using the right term that fits how you're going to buy, sell, and insure your product or your customer's product. So it's really critical that you understand all 11 of those, find the one that fits you best, and make sure you're negotiating with your buyer and your sellers the contract that fits best with how you want to run your business. This is a sheet that I won't spend a lot of time on, but there are in Incoterms, there are 4 categories that they put things in. And these are the categories they use. Now, these categories come important to you only if in your agreement, you're changing things from one group to another. And usually we don't do that. If we go DDP, it's DDP, and that's the way it is. So I put these out there so that you'll know what categories they are in Incoterms, but you'll probably use this less than the tools that I gave you earlier, understanding how to use it, things like that. You will see these terms fly up on shipping documents and customer documents. But once you decide upon which term you're using, those things tend to fall in place very easily. The next is the process for customs clearance. And this is important because it involves the preparation and submission of documents. And we'll talk a little bit about packing lists and country of origin, and all those things are important. But to get things through a custom in a particular country, the clients represent doing that examination, the assessment, payment, duties, co-taking of delivery of the cargo, which says you will have identified the Incoterm that you're using to make sure this flows through the system. And then customs will clear that based on all that information being correct. I'm going to talk about packing lists, and I want to talk about invoices, because packing lists and bill of ladings and invoices need to match before you get through the clearance process. And you need to know who's managing clearance. And those Incoterms can tell you who's managing clearance versus the point in time that you take delivery. The commercial invoice. Of course, this is a term that's used mostly in the United States. They call other things in other places. But this is what customs use to declare that what you're trying to move from point A to point B across international borders, although there is no standard format, and you'll see each country doing a little different, the documents must include the specific pieces of information for the parties involving shipping transaction, the goods being transported, the country of manufacture or country of origin, and the harmonized system codes, which is something that's only used in certain parts of the country. And we don't fall into that very much. There's another document on that we'll talk about slightly, but unless you're selling directly to a customer's government, you'd probably never use that data. Commercial invoice must include the statement certifying that the invoice is true and a signature. It's the commercial invoice is used to calculate the tariffs, and tariffs from country to country, if they exist, are very different. So this is the document that determines how much you're going to pay in tariffs from international commercial items. And again, here's the cost of CIF. There's a piece in there where it's commonly used for customs purposes. Well, this is the document that determines what you're going to pay and who you're going to pay it to. Commercial invoices in Europe countries are not normally used for payment, but identifies the invoice, and the word invoice in all of its commercial uses. But sometimes it doesn't say commercial. They'll just say invoice and what an invoice means. Okay. This happens to be a copy of a standard invoice, all right? It talks about who the sender is, their name, address, telephone number. It gives the invoice date, the carrier tracking number, who you've agreed to is going to move this product. It gives you the carrier's name. It gives you the quantity. It gives you the weight, the gross weight, total numbers of pieces being shipped, the currencies being used to spend on it, and all of that. The flip side of that, it tells you who is going to. It tells you if the sender has a reference number, who it is, and it tells you how is it going, how much it weighs, and the value of that particular product. So this is critical. This is a sample. They all look different. This happens to be one that we had a sample of, but an invoice will look quite different. All the data will be there, but they may not look just like this one of the most important things you're going to do is bill of lading. I'm going to go through this definition of a bill of lading in the description because I think this is critical. It's one of the most important documents in your shipping process. To ship any good, a bill of lading is required and acts as a receipt and a contract. A completed bill of lading legally shows that the carrier has received the freight as described and is obligated to deliver that freight in good condition to the consignee. This is very important. And if you bought something or shipped something and it didn't arrive in the condition it needs to be in, it goes back to this bill of lading, which has that all in there. The description, the information in the bill of lading is critical as it directs the action of persons and or organizations along the route of shipment, where it's going, the pieces, counts, how it's billed, how it's handled on the dock and on the trailer. It could be prepaid or collected based on the particular Incoterm that you particularly use. The consignee has to check whether the shipment is collected on delivery, which means that the driver will collect the cost of the merchandise on delivering freight. And there's usually a document that he's going to sign off that says that the material delivered was arrived and delivered in good shape. And if you find something that's not, right on that bill of lading, it's where you get the document, things are broken or didn't arrive as planned. Markings. All shipments have markings. International markings are a way to make sure that we have standard signs that every country can understand. It's like, you want this right side up, it's fragile. It has a particular notice on there or where it needs to go. And that's kind of important, all right? So I'm gonna go through a few of these that talks about the pictures and the relevance and what that means. At the end, I have some additional pictures that we don't use normally, but they are used in different parts of the country, okay? So here's some of the markings. These are some really standard markings. It's the handling mark, and they may tell you upright. There's a consignment designation that gives you the description of the order, the number. On all of your packaging has a weight. On each package has a weight. And then on your bill of lading, your package list gives you a number of packages there. If you have 10 packages, each pack will say this is number 9 of 10 or number 6 of 10. We have on the markings the country of origin. And then we handle some other handling marking. Again, there's some different ones. I don't want to go through all of them at this point in time, but I did put a package on the end that will allow people to see some different markings like fragile and some other kinds of things like that. Okay. The packing list. Now this is another critical. It needs to match your bill of lading. But the packing list is a document in international trade that provides the exporter, the international freight forwarder, and the ultimate consignees with information about the shipment. This list also includes details about how the shipment is packed and the marks and the number that are included in this particular packing list. Continue with packing list. Some of the names on package, depending upon what country in, they're called different things. And so if someone calls this a bill of parcel, they're really talking about a packing list or unpacking note, packing slip, delivery document, delivery list, a manifest, shipping list, and sometimes called custom receipt. This is all your packing list. And in your packing list, like that, it's pretty critical that you have exactly what you have, how many boxes, the weight, and everything is on your packing list. So that becomes a pretty important part of what we're doing. At the end, I've actually developed how to do a packing list, but I didn't put in the original presentation because I was scared that I would go over our time. Packing list continues. What should an export packing list include? And this is that list of things that a packing list should include, all right? It must always include information about the number of units, the boxes, other available packing information. Information must match the commercial invoice. And that's critical. Your packing list, your commercial invoice, and your bill of lading needs to have the same information. It should reflect the same parties to the transaction. It should be the same buyer, same seller. You can't change that in between. It should be also clarified if solid wood is used in packing of the shipment. Most countries enforce the certain fumigation and heat treating for wood. And this is because wood has transferred termites and other things in other parts of the country where they don't exist. And so there is a regulation to make sure that any wood shipment that is shipped as a part of international shipment has been treated. And there's a whole document on how you treat that and what must be included in that treatment. Okay. Additionally, packing list must include, if you've done those things, a certificate that says that the wood that you're using in your packaging has been certified as to meet those requirements. Packing list, again, continue. Is it illegal? And this gets questioned quite a bit. The commercial invoice and the bill of lading and the one other part of the package, the original of consignment, those are legal documents. The packing list is not legal, but it gets you into a lot of trouble if your bill of lading and your commercial invoice don't match. It slows down the ability to get through customs, and creates another great opportunity for things to be misshipped, unpacked, your product to be unboxed and looked into to confirm what you say you have is what you have. So if those things are consistent in all those documents, you'll be okay. If not, you could run into problems. But the packing list is not a legal document. It is a document that is great help for what they do. It's used at every location, but it's not legal. But here's why it's important. The packing, even though it's not legal, it provides the count of product that's being released. It also serves as proof of the inland bill of lading. It indicates the detailed requirements for certificate of origin. And again, depending upon where your state's coming from and tariffs in relation with other countries, there are certain countries where other countries don't buy from, and therefore you would not be allowed to ship your product into that particular location. It provides much of the detail needed by electronic export information in the system. It serves as proof of material safety data because it talks about the fumigation. In the case of goods deemed hazardous or dangerous, and beyond the fact that the wood is that way, there are other products that people have on their list that says, we don't want this coming into our country. And so you need to be careful about that. It's used to create a booking with the international carrier, as well as ensure that the international bill of lading matches, all right? It helps partner customer brokers and entering the list of goods in a country's import database or it contains important information. It serves as a guide for the receiver/buyer when counting the product to see if all was received. And it serves as supporting document for reimbursing under the letters of credit. And you understand that in certain countries, you cannot ship out of the country unless you have a letter of credit. It says the bank, you must have a relationship with the bank in that country, and they say you have enough money to cover the cost of this product being shipped. Next is the certificate of origin. This document is certified that says this is the country where the commodity and goods are being manufactured. The certificate of origin contains information regarding the product, its destination, and its country of export. And I said, this has a major impact on tariffs country by country. So it's a critical part of what we need to do. What I've added here is just a strategy to consider as things flow through. I wish I could have made this bigger. For some reason, I couldn't do that. But it tells you the relationship with what you need to do to move the product through. In that first box, and I know it's hard to read, is you negotiate the transaction payment terms of your contract. This is when you decide, are you sitting FOB, X Works, DDP, or whatever? And then the buyer issues his purchase order. Suppliers prepare orders and the packing list. It talks about the commercial invoice that needs to be done, how that moves to the carrier, the transportation provider. It does the arrangements of the customer clearance by buyer and seller. And then the documents presents those documents to the customs. It's the commercial invoice, the U.S. Customs invoice, a copy of the carrier way bill. We haven't talked about way bills, but it's very similar. It's usually used in waterways. Certificate of origin goes through the customs clearance. And then once those things are reviewed and received, and all the payment issues are taken care of, then things can come out of that process as completing the transaction. This is a continuation of the overview of an export process. And it basically does the same thing. It has a slightly different movement on some of the things that's happening, but it's basically the same information. It's buyer issues a purchase order. It prepares the international order of packing list, commercial invoice, considered marking requirements, which is one thing we went through on markings. It prepares the documents for export clarification, the commercial invoice, the certificate of origin that moves to the carrier or the transportation with along with the waybill. It notifies U.S. Customs within its established framework the time things are arrived. Foreign customs, the commercial invoice, the certificate of origin, export permits that are provided by the transportation company. Other foreign customs documents are requirement. And then it goes through its clearing process, final counting, payments, make sure the duties and everything is paid, and goods received, proof of delivery, payment issues, and you enter that into this general ledger. So that's the process and the strategy that it goes through once it gets from your location through however it's being shipped to the in customer's location. The import export document requirements. Again, it's overview of the commercial documents. It's the commercial invoice, packing list, certificate of origin. Now, I didn't put that in there, but bill of lading should be in that market as well. The bill of lading should match the commercial invoice and the packing list. Permits for export and import goods. There's an electronic export information, the EEI, and then electronic transfer that information into database and other things. Cargo control documents. These are documents that's in the shipping containers, and that shipping organization handle that. Other commercial documents, distribution of commercial documents is all handled through it's from the seller to the logistics companies into the port and then on to the end user. Okay. That's kind of how that works. This next page is just a document that that shows how the document gets distributed into the rest of the process. So this just talks about the supplier, exporter, forwarding, the commercial invoice and packing list, and who it goes to. Well, it goes the purchaser, importer, commercial carrier, customers, brokers. Docs must accompany the shipment. The next piece is shippers and carriers, transportation, way bill, insurance certifications. They go the purchaser, importer, customer, broker. It must be accomplished with the shipment. So these are the documents that we talked about, and they must be with the shipment as things move. The next one is a circular invoice. Now, the consular invoice is one I didn't talk about. The consular invoice is a special document that is created if you are doing business with direct business with a government or organization that is managed by the government. And that the government agency must give you clearance. I have a little statement when I get toward the end here where I will share with you about consular invoices. We don't use them very much, but it's one that if you're selling directly to the government of another country, it may be that country's consular invoice to be verified by that government before you move the product through. The last one on there is certificate of origin. And this is where the purchaser invoice makes sure that it's clear where the products are manufactured, where the products manufactured, and the relationship with the country you're entering has a huge impact on the tariffs and or taxes you might pay to do business in that particular part of the world. So it's pretty important. Next one now, I didn't know if I'd have time to get to these, but I wanted to get through these if I had time, and it looks like we had time. Is how do I fill out a packing list? And this is just information for you to make sure that when you're filling it out, you make sure that all this data is there, clear, easy to read, and in a place on your package where it's easy to access. All right, it's the date, it's the shipment exporter, contact, consign, contract, agreement, origin of the cargo, destination, address of the cargo. It's like that invoice example I showed you. You gotta say where it's coming from. You gotta say who it's going to. And those names can't change in the middle of the process. Okay. Total number of packages within the shipment. And each package needs to be identified this number of this total group. That way, if a package comes up missing, you can find out which package is missing and maybe even find out where it went. A detailed description of each package, the volume and weight of each package, the volume weight of the entire shipment, and the commercial invoice number of the shipping that. Once you get that, that needs to be a part of that as well. Okay. The other thing I didn't talk about much, and since the time seems to be okay, is the bill of lading. This is some bill of lading documents that I didn't go over, but dry docking and what dry docking means. Dry docking basically means if you have material that's coming to a country and for some reason has to be set aside, the area that that's put in is called dry dock. And you can have things waiting in inspection, other things for dry dock for long periods of time. This says 12 months to 24 months. Usually that doesn't happen, but there's a discrepancy in your shipment and it has to be put in a dry dock if you bill of lading. This is the kind of situation it goes through. The NVOCC standards it stands for non-vehicle owning common carrier. This is comprised of sales and transportation containers in the gateway ports, bill of lading issues, overseas distribution. Agents of NVOC, there's a description that gets assigned to them within the shipping lines. They guarantee the shipment, the bill, the number of units in each, and the return shipments online are in the bill of lading. And then, of course, the bill of lading, which we talked about, is one of the most important documents. It says where it's who you're shipping to, what the goods are. It says it's a legal document that shows what the carrier, what they're receiving, the freight description, the obligation to be delivered, the freight, goods, and condition to the consignee or the person who receives it. Then the other is the cost and freight. Cost and freight is when freight refers to all other cost-related items, meaning transportation of goods. It means seller must pay cost of freight necessary to bring the goods to the name of the port and the destination, and must also procure marine insurance and all the things necessary to get things from country A to country B. All right. And these are just some things when you go through bill of lading, these are some added things that I didn't talk about in that because it's only used sparingly, depending upon what types of things you're shipping and whether or not it will ever have to go through the non-vehicle owning common carrier, or if it has to go to a dry dock situation because things don't match. And people have lost a lot of production and lost a lot of opportunity when things get put into a dry dock because things don't match, and it could cost a lot of time to verify what they are, what they're made of, are they okay, are they to specification, things like that. The next piece is other markings. Now these are other markings that you might see depending upon what country you're in. And I didn't go through the detail of identifying every one of them. But markings you might see on a box that comes from you from international shipment would look something like this. They wouldn't be the markings we would put on shipping in the other direction. But these are some additional markings. And I thought, well, if you see something like this, these are just pictorial diagrams of what other things mean, whether it's keep dry, it's fragile, you need to keep it in a way that the center of gravity is okay, use no hooks, it's photographic material which says, okay, don't expose it to a lot of light, or it's not stackable. These are the other kinds of things that you'll find in this type of material that I thought I would share And depends on whether we had time or not to kind of share some of the other things. The last thing I wanted to add that wasn't in my original, because I wasn't sure whether we'll be participating throughout the process or just presenting and then coming back, was the consular invoice, which is the document I told you about. If you are working and you are selling to a particular country, there may be a consul of that country who requires that the invoice comes through their officials to be verified before they're allowed to come into their country. Now, most of us don't ship things that meet that criteria, but with the adding of the pandemic and things like that, if you have product that you ship or services that's related to the current pandemic, you may sell directly to a particular government or items to support those, whether it's PPE or others. And there may be a requirement where you have to use this consular invoice to be able to make sure it gets to the right people, it's approved by the country, and it gets into the country. Okay. That is the end of the presentation, the formal presentation. And now we can go back and ask some questions or just chat.
Hello, everyone. If you have any questions, can you put them in the chat?
If you don't get any right away, Debris, I have one for you. Back to the group. Is how many of these Incoterms on this list are you using today?
And I do have a couple of questions for you. The first one, is it the role of the freight? Sorry. The first one is it the role of the freight forwarder to handle these items in the presentation?
It is my perspective. The freight forwarder will handle a lot of details and confirm you have the right information that goes as they move your product. But deciding how you're going to pay, who's going to pay, is up to the seller or the buyer. You have to decide that. Then you work with your freight forwarder to meet all the requirements based on that Incoterm. So you got to decide if I'm buying from someone who is selling to me DDP, it says that they're paying everything. The freight forwarder needs to make sure that everything is done. So that all those payments, customs, shipping, everything is done by the seller. But you have to decide what that relationship is before you tell the freight forwarder how you want to handle the shipment. Then he makes it happen.
Mr. Allen, so Naomi has a question, and I think it may be a little bit more detailed. So Naomi, I'm sorry, Nina Womack, can you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation and the opportunity. I learned a lot. I am just launching, as of this year, a new international export-import business because I have a lot of business connections in Africa. I'm also just recently went there in December to Ghana and became a Queen Mother of Development. So I'm working with the community in Ghana and other countries in Africa. So right now I'm in the planning phase of doing export and import between Los Angeles and the US and Africa, like Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, etc. One of my business connections over there that I'm working with in Nigeria, he just called me today, last night actually, to ask me a question. He is also new to the exporting business, and he's working with a buyer in Kenya who's interested in cowpeas and groundnuts and sesame seeds. And my associate can supply that in Nigeria. He called me specifically to ask me if I would loan him money so he can pay for the SGS certificate. And from there, his bank would issue a letter of credit for him to do the shipment, finish the shipment and so forth. And, before I loan him, I mean, it wouldn't be a loan. I would look at it as an investment because I would have to get an ROI off of the transaction.
Ms. Womack, can you I guess consolidate and just tell us what your question is? Because there's a lot of background. So can you give us the specific question?
Sure. So if you're new to exporting, like, does that make sense that the bank would issue you a letter of credit after you have purchased after you went through the CGS certification, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, again, I've never bought nuts, food items, and I'm sure that's a little bit out of my bailiwick. But I don't think I would ever pay someone before we've established a letter of credit to move my product out. I think people get lost in the transfer of money, which they can never get back, and no business has been done yet. Unless you have some kind of a really strong agreement on how your money is going to get returned to you upon shipping this product or receipt of this product or something, I'd be very careful about putting money out on an unproven process. That I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying I would be very concerned about doing that. And so I think letters of credit are based on your ability to pay, not what you've paid already. But every new arrangement is going to be different, especially in this pandemic. But I can tell you, I know of 3 people who've invested money early before product was shipped, and they still are waiting on product.
Can I make a comment? This is Lori Elliott.
Yes.
Nina, I have been working in Africa 18 years. Don't do it. Okay. I'll be glad to give you my number on the side so I can talk, because that's not the proper way to do it. Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, so if you, I guess, contact DeVry, I'll be glad to give my number so that, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, the other thing you can do, Laura, is you can direct message her in the chat if you want to. Like, you can do it to where it would only
Oh,
go.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. I'll do that.
Of course, I
I'll
can
do
do it
that
for
then.
you as well, but.
Okay, I forgot. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. So the next question we have is, does the trade credit insurance protect the product during shipment, or is it marine, or would they need marine insurance?
Well, that's a good question. And it depends on, my experience is it is better to find a freight forwarder who manages all of that for you, including the insurance, so that you don't have to pick and choose which things you're going to pay for or not, and work with multiple insurance, whether it's marine or whether it's if you're going to do it by rail, the rail agency. Every place, every point, your product needs to be insured. I would pick a freight forwarder who does it for me instead of individually doing it. I've never tried to do it individually because I think that creates more work for you to do it. When there are experts out there and they do this every day, all over the world, you have to find the right one that has your value at heart and who's economically sound for you to do business with it. Because every time they do some of these things, they tend to make money on them. but I'd find someone else to do it and wouldn't try to save money by doing it myself. Too many complications. If your product just gets stuck just for a month, whatever profit you were going to make, there's a good possibility you would have lost it by then. I hope that answers your question, but
Wait a minute. Here we go. Okay, here's our next question. It's about the origin. It says the origin of manufacturer. What if the product is assembled in another place, then shipped to another? I guess they're asking if it was assembled one place and then shipped to another, who would be the origin of manufacturer?
the origin of manufacturer is really important going from country to country. Okay, let me give you an example. AGI has a product that we buy in India. Product comes to me, that's the origin of the product. I do some assembly work and ship it to my US customers. On the part itself, the origin of that product's manufacture, the piece parts, is actually stamped on the part. So the origin manufacturer, if you're doing manufacturing components, I don't mean food and services because you can't do that with it. But on component parts, the origin manufacturers also usually stamp right on the manufactured component. Can't do that with nuts and fruit and vegetables. But on manufacturing components, that's a part of the process is to stamp the origin of manufacturing right into the product. And then they're assembled someplace else. Hope that helps.
All right, our next question is, how are damages addressed when they are found after the bill of lading is signed? Some damages are not found until the package is fully unpacked.
Well, there's a process with your freight forwarder, whoever you're working with. You sign off a bill that says you got 13 boxes and all the boxes looked okay. You open the box and you find that at that point in time, there's something missing, not right, broken or whatever. At that point in time, you take that bill of lading, you identify which box is broken, and you go back to your freight forwarder and you try to work it out through there. And in most cases, it works out very well that if something's broken and you couldn't see it in the packaging, which is how it was delivered, that you get compensated for that. And while you're doing it, anytime you sign for a bill of lading, the deliverer takes a copy and you have a copy, and use your copy to make the adjustments on.
Okay, it looks like that is all of the questions that we have. Somebody just put in the links to XM Bank, which is the insurance. Someone just shared some links.
Well, I think, Deborah, you're talking to the right people. The MBDA XM Bank has a tremendous amount of additional things they can do with you on export products where the US government has a relationship. And I would always use them if you could. And Deborah, you can talk to them about the Pat Haynes and the other parts of the organization who handles XM Bank. I'm telling you, it's so different. 15 years ago where it was and where it is today, it's night and day. And I would use them if you could. That's for financing what you need to do and making sure that you're with a bank that's your money's secure, that's understanding the legal obligations that the US has put on countries to make sure that your monies are safe. And there's a lot more now than there were, again, years ago when I started doing a lot of export stuff.
So are there any other questions? Because if not, then I think our session will end.
Okay.
Wait a minute, let's see. I have something else here.
Okay.
Okay, it says, if an end product has multiple manufacturers, are all of them required to be listed?
In most cases, there is a particular seller who's selling you a product. If he happened to use multiple people to sell you the product, he at the seller would be listed, not everybody he gets a part from. Another example would be, if you buy a harness from a foreign country and the harness components, the wires come from one place, the plastics, the clips, the connectors come from different places. But when you buy the wiring harness, the harness will have a manufacturer of record and a country of origin. That is what you would use to move that forward.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we will end the session. I'm Devery Fowler, once again, from the Chicago MBDA Export Center. For those of you who would like a copy of today's presentation, just email me. All you do is respond to the email that sent you the link to today's session. I want to thank Mr. Allen and AGI, and everyone have a great evening. And the next section we're doing is we have 2 more classes coming up, and that is on grant writing, because during this time with COVID, there's been a ton of grants available for businesses. So we have a grant writer coming in, and what she's going to do, she's also going to go through one of the grants that's on I Fund Women, to just use it as an example to kind of give people an idea of where they may be missing the mark if they've applied for grants and haven't gotten them. And then our last thing that we're going to do is we're going to have attorney Radiance, and she will be talking about trademarking. So trademarking your business, intellectual property. And so those will be wrapping us up for year 5. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
All right, thank you.